that we can once again have Hugh at IATEFL Poland webinar. Over to you, Hugh.
Thank you very much. So let me just work out how I now screen share. Give me a second. One second. Share screen. I'm viewing IATEFL screen.
That's I've just kind of switched off, so
okay.
I'm pretty sure we'll be able to do it.
Give me 1 second, everyone, while we just negotiate the usual technical weirdness. Story of the last year for all of us. Give us a second. So I have to choose to stop participants sharing in red letters. Give me a minute while I do that. Okay, this meeting is being recorded. Good to know. Okay, 1 sec. So I need to just exit from Martin's screen, which still seems to be there. Oh, this is usually the time when I accidentally press end meeting.
End meeting.
Disaster strikes.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah,
that's
you can
wonderful.
see it. So can I leave you just to admit the people into the room, Martin?
I will do that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, hello, welcome. Thank you very much to Poland IATEFL for inviting me back again and for organising these events and for everything they do. I've often said it's one of my very favourite conferences to speak at and go to, and probably like everyone watching, I really miss the face-to-face events and being able to see people in the flesh. But here we are in the digital realm for now. So as you heard, my name's Hugh Dellar. I'm a teacher and teacher trainer and coursebook writer based here in sunny North London. I'm up in the attic of my house where it's like a sauna. And what we're going to be talking about today is the whole issue of how we help students get better at speaking, okay? And I'm going to begin with a little experiment. I'm going to do a little bit of a breakout room action with you. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms, and just for a couple of minutes, what I'd like you to think about, talk about, are these 3 questions, really. When you're doing a listening lesson, what kind of stages does the lesson typically go through? What do you think the purpose of each stage is? What do you think the skills are that get developed in a listening lesson? And what do you do already as a teacher to help your students hear or listen better? Okay, I'll give you a few minutes to talk through those, and then we'll come back and get started. So there we go. I'll come round and listen. Can you turn your mic off, please, whoever that is? So, welcome back. Every time I try and do breakout rooms with large groups, I'm reminded of why you should never try to do breakout rooms with large groups. So I hope some of you managed to find some people in some rooms and have a quick chat through some of these issues. I think for me, when I first started as a teacher, listening was the area that most bemused and scared me. I guess I used to believe that students would just get better at listening through the process of listening, and that the more listening we did, somehow the more magically able to process the speed of spoken language that students were exposed to, they would become. I also, because of my CELTA and my Delta training, was brought up to believe, really, as a teacher, in the primary role of skills. So I used to do lots of lessons where the primary focus, stated in my lesson aims sometimes, was, to activate students' schemata, to develop students' ability to predict, to help students listen for gist, to help students listen for specific information, and so on. And probably, like most of you, for a long time, I kind of walked the skills walk and talked the skills talk. And often, I think, in language teaching, we have this idea that it's important to activate schema, okay? So often what we do is we give students information about context. We show students pictures about places. We ask them to predict, who do you think these people are? Where are they? What do you think they're going to be talking about? And we do all of these things because we've been told that this helps to activate students' schema or schemata. It helps them to have a kind of general understanding of the topic or the kind of context within which the listening they're going to hear will operate, and that somehow this is supposed to help them with their top-down processing. They use their understanding of context and situations to fill in the gaps that they miss. Well, that's an interesting theory. We're going to do a quick test to see how much this is actually true. In a few minutes, you're going to hear some extracts from a conversation, okay? Because I'm a generous person, I'm going to give you some background to the conversation. The conversation is between three people, two men and a woman, and they're all in their mid-30s. The conversation takes place on a wet Tuesday evening in a modern Spanish fusion restaurant in North London that's just reopened after the pandemic. The three are old friends. They all met at university 12, 15 years ago, and they all went to the University of Nottingham, okay? One of the men is a doctor, and he studied medicine at the university. He's now doing quite well as a doctor, but obviously, like a lot of people who work for the National Health Service, he works very long hours. The woman is his wife. They met at university, and she's now a lawyer. She studied law at university. And she runs her own practice. She's an independent, self-employed lawyer working with two other people, specializing in human rights law. And she's been working for herself for the last 7 or 8 years, but it's also quite a high-powered, well-paid, but very stressful job. They both work long hours. Added to this is the fact that they have 2 young children. They have a boy of 7 and a girl of 5. They're both at home this evening with a babysitter. And having young kids and working long hours obviously has put a bit of a strain on their relationship over recent years. The other guy is an English language teacher. He studied English literature at university and now lives in Milan where he teaches English. He's been living in Milan for the last 3 years, and he lives there with his boyfriend because he's gay. And they've all just sat down in this restaurant. The guy who lives in Milan is going to be staying with the other couple in their house in North London. And he's just arrived from Italy, and to celebrate having not seen each other for a long time because of the lockdown and the pandemic, they've gone out for dinner in a restaurant. So they sit down and they start talking. If I was stupid enough to do breakout rooms again, which I'm not going to do, I'd ask you to predict what you think they're going to talk about. And you'd shout out all kinds of things. You'd say, the weather, Brexit, the European Championship, work, family. They might have an argument about the pressures in their relationship. They might ask him about his boyfriend. How's Italy? They might talk about all of these different kinds of things. Jeannie, what do you want? Come on, let me work. Go on, let me work. Wait for Nat. I'm sorry, this is my son. And I might ask you, what do you think they're going to say about these things? And you might have some ideas. Because it's a restaurant, you might also predict they're going to talk about food, they're going to talk about the menu. And again, I might ask you, what do you think they're going to say? You might have some ideas. We could spend 10, 15 minutes doing this little game. And then you'd hear the listening. What you're going to hear now are 5 sentences from the listening itself, okay? I'm going to say each one of them twice. You're not going to hear them in the accents of the people actually saying them, and you're not going to hear them with any background noise, but you are going to hear them at normal speed. And what I'd like you to try to do is to write down what you think you hear, okay? This is like putting yourself back in your student's shoes. Are you ready? You might need a pen and a bit of paper. So, number 1. You ready? Number 1, Jeannie, leave it, leave it. Can you leave it? I'm working. Come on. Number 1. Is everyone having a starter? Is everyone having a starter? Number 2. Seared salmon on a bed of fennel sounds nice. The seared salmon on a bed of fennel sounds nice. I'll say that one more time because I messed up the first one because I was distracted by my son. The seared salmon on a bed of fennel sounds nice. Number 3. Should have left the car at home. Should have left the car at home. Number 4. Yesterday the cat talked in the sea. Yesterday the cat talked in the sea. And finally, number 5. The latter is sunken over by Canterbury. The latter is sunken over by Canterbury. Now, in a more normal situation, I might put you in rooms or pairs and ask you to compare what you've got. And then we'd check and I'd reveal the answers. So here they are. You can check for yourself how well you did. Let's see. Number 1, is everyone having a starter? Is everyone having a starter? Okay. Number 2, seared salmon on a bed of fennel sounds nice. Seared salmon on a bed of fennel sounds nice. Number 3, should have left the car at home. Should have left the car at home. Number 4, and this is where it starts to get a bit weird, so bear with me here. Yesterday the cat talked in the sea. Yesterday the cat talked in the sea. And number 5, if you were thinking that just sounds like total gibberish, total nonsense, well, that's because it was. And what you heard was, the latter is sunken over by Canterbury. Okay, again, bear with me. There's method to my madness here. So you might be wondering what's going on and why am I asking you to do this rather weird experiment at the beginning of a talk about listening? Well, I think we need to return to our basic question. And the basic question is, where were we? 1 second. Do skills help? Okay. Did all of that information I gave you and all of that prediction and all of that asking you for your ideas help you hear anything that you wouldn't have heard if I hadn't just said, I'm going to say 5 sentences, try and write them down. My argument would be absolutely not. Okay, you would have written what you've written, whether we did that whole big guessing game and context setting or not. If I'd just come in and said, okay, number 1, is everyone having a starter? You would have written that as well as you wrote it now. Possibly the only word you might have heard is starter. Okay, and you might have written something like that. So I think the first thing to say is, all of these guessing games and predicting and activating schemata don't help you. Because actually, when you're listening, sometimes one of the problems you have is even hearing things that you know, things that you've heard hundreds of times before, can be difficult. You have the speed of speech to deal with. You have different accents, and there are millions out there in the world to deal with. You have background noise, and you have the fact that people don't repeat things, and so on. Okay? So I'm guessing all of you, when you see a sentence like, is everyone having a starter? You look at that and you think, oh, that's so easy. That's like elementary level English. But being able to hear, is everyone having a starter? And know that that is everyone having a starter, is much more difficult. Okay, so sometimes even things you know are difficult to hear. On top of that, you can predict as much as you like. You could have predicted they'll talk about food. Yeah, maybe. What do you think they might say? They'll talk about what they're going to order for a starter. Yeah, okay. What do you think they might order? Maybe fish. Okay, good. Well, you can do that kind of predicting and guessing game, but it won't help you hear seared salmon on a bed of fennel unless you already know what seared salmon on a bed of fennel is. Okay? You can't hear words or phrases if you don't know them. Over the last year or so, I've been trying, mostly quite unsuccessfully, to try to get a little bit better at Russian. I'm a kind of A0 going on for A1 level speaker of Russian. And one of the problems I have is I can only hear words I know. So when I'm listening to Russian, and I've been to Russia many, many times, and I've heard hundreds of hours of Russian conversation, the problem is most of it just sounds like хорошо, муж, да, ладно. I only hear the things I know, and I can't hear the things I don't know because I don't know them. Okay, sometimes I don't even hear the things that I do know, but I definitely can't hear things I don't know. And that's probably the same for you when you're trying to hear things like the seared salmon on a bed of fennel sounds nice. Sometimes you hear the words and the phrases, but you can't process them as a unit of meaning, especially in real time. So often students will hear things like, I'm only here for a couple of days, so I want to make the most of my time. And they're kind of thinking, make, okay, the most, okay, of, okay, my time, okay. While you're stopping and thinking about what that group of words together means as a single whole, okay, the conversation's moved on. The listening in the classroom does not stop and wait for you while you're thinking about what's going on. Maybe when you heard yesterday the cat talked in the sea, a little bit of you is thinking, I think I just heard yesterday the cat talked in the sea, but that doesn't make any sense. What does that mean? Is it an idiom that no one told me about? Oh my God, maybe I misheard it. Maybe it wasn't that at all. While you're having all of those thoughts, and in case you're panicking, by the way, it was just a nonsense idiom that I invented. Okay, it doesn't mean anything. It's just to give you that feeling of what it's like from a student's point of view again. So when you're going through that kind of experience, you're missing everything that's coming after you. Another problem is sometimes all you hear is a blur of sound, okay? I'm sure you've all had that experience where you've asked students, so what did you hear for number 1? And students just kind of go, sometimes when I'm listening to French, which I also speak at kind of A2 level, all I hear is like, Okay, you know, that's basically all it sounds like, just this kind of blur of accented sound. Maybe what you try to do, and maybe some of you did this with number 5, is you try to impose meaning onto that blur of sound. You try to think, well, maybe it sounds like handbag. The latter has sunken over by cannabag. Latte has spilled, fallen, something, done, latte's done something on my handbag. Maybe you try and impose words you know onto what you're hearing. But really, all you're hearing is the latter has sunken over by cannabag. Okay, complete nonsense, basically. So I think what it means is just recognizing that what good listeners do doesn't depend on skills. Listening is basically first, actually, I think I've written this the wrong way round. First and foremost, it's about knowing the language, okay? Then it's about hearing the language that you know at the speed it's being delivered at, with the accent it's being delivered at, with the background noise that's going on. The skills are irrelevant. They don't help you with this. So, where are we? 1 second. So you might be thinking, okay, well, you sort of destroyed my feelings and my beliefs about teaching listening. So what can we do to teach listening better? Well, I think maybe a way of reframing that idea would be, what can we do to help students hear the language better? And maybe the first thing and the most important thing we can do to help students hear better, ironically, is more pronunciation, okay? I used to believe that the main reason for doing pronunciation was to improve, whatever that meant, my students' pronunciation. The reality is the vast majority of students, particularly adult students, leave a course basically with the same accent that they started a course with. No matter how much pronunciation I do, none of my students ever sound like me. Okay, they leave the course sounding like Russian speakers of English, or French speakers of English, or Arabic speakers of English, or German speakers of English, or whatever. If you're worried about doing pronunciation because you think maybe students will end up with my accent, well, if you're a Moroccan teacher teaching Moroccan students, or a Polish teacher teaching Polish students, or, you know, a Moldovan teacher teaching Moldovan students, your students will end up with your accent, okay, because you share the same first language. I later came to realize that the main reason for doing pronunciation isn't to improve students' productive output. The main reason for doing it is to improve their hearing. And I think what it means is, away from listening lessons, focusing on pronunciation beyond the phoneme level, okay? Things like ship and sheep and light and right. They're not most students' main problems, and they're certainly not something that affects hearing in particular. I think what it means is focusing on pronunciation all the time in class, okay? Particularly from elementary up to about intermediate, say, where you're saying things fast and you're saying things slow. You're viewing pronunciation as primarily receptive, and you're integrating that into every class. So if you're teaching something like I taught this morning, which was, you've jinxed it, okay? Like if you say, I think Poland are going to beat Slovakia. Don't say that, you'll jinx it. You'll put bad luck on it, okay? When I'm teaching that, you've jinxed it, okay? Because one of my students this morning said, my son's been sleeping really well. He's sleeping at the moment, actually. Oh no! He's suddenly woken up and he started screaming. Oh, you've jinxed it. Well, as I teach that, I'll teach it with the grammar, okay? And I'll drill it as I'd say it. You jinxed it. You've jinxed it. You've jinxed it. You hardly hear the present perfect part. And if you're doing this all the time with the vocabulary you're teaching and with the grammar that you're teaching, the students get a chance to hear weak forms, kind of consonant death, the way in which words squeeze together all the time. If you're teaching elementary level students and you're teaching be going to, okay, you might want to do little dictations where you say things fast and then normal speed, kind of slower speed. So you might do things like, what you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? What you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Where are you going to stay? 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 And if you're doing that kind of thing all the time, or if the course book you're using does this all the time, here's one I prepared earlier, it makes life easier for you and for the students, because you're training their ear all the time you're in the classroom with them. Okay, so just more prom helps listening. I think it also means thinking about teaching typical language. It means teaching words with the other words and the grammar they often go with. And it means teaching grammar with the words and other bits of grammar they often go with. So if you are going to be drilling and helping students say things better and hear things better, it makes sense if the things that you're drilling are things students are really going to hear, okay? So, you know, say you're teaching the present continuous to low-level learners. Much more useful to drill and get used to hearing what you're doing this weekend, what you're doing tonight, what are you doing, what are you doing this weekend, what you doing this weekend, what are you doing tonight, what you doing tonight. Much more useful to learn and drill those two questions than she's playing the guitar. She's playing the guitar. They are eating dinner. They're eating dinner. Because you're much more likely to say and to hear what you're doing tonight than you are to say or to hear, they're eating dinner. So again, it's just thinking about teaching typical language, teaching useful language, helping students to say and to hear useful examples of grammar and vocabulary in action. Okay. On top of that, it means thinking about recycling the words and chunks and phrases and sentences that you teach. And the more you recycle them, the more chance students get to hear the sound envelopes they come in, okay? So they get used to things like how long questions with the present perfect generally sound something like, how long than that? Okay, how long you been living there? How long you been working there? How long you been seeing each other? Yeah, you know, they get used to that kind of little sound shape that question with the present perfect continuous is often contained within. So more of all of that. If you are going to focus on problem sounds, like discrete phoneme level sounds, and I'm not saying there's no place for it, again, I think it's important not just to focus on the individual sounds, but to kind of start from the sound, build up, break it down, build it up. So, for example, last year I had a Thai student who had real trouble with diphthongs that had consonants on the end. So things like weird or beard, okay? He would say things like where, bear, bear. And you'd kind of go, no, listen, weird. And he'd say, where? And you'd go, no, listen, weird. And he'd say, where? And you'd get stuck in this kind of, yeah, I understand that you think you're saying what you think I'm saying, but I can hear that you're not, but my correction isn't helping you, is it? So what can we do here? So in this situation, what I end up doing is kind of think, okay, let's focus first on the kind of problem sound in the middle, which is ear, ear. And you exaggerate it, you show what your face is doing, what your mouth is doing. The classroom's no place for shy people. You show that, and then you kind of go, okay, listen, weird, weird, okay? What weird weather? What weird weather? What a weird exercise. What a weird exercise. What a weird exercise. What a weird exercise. What a weird question. What a weird question. And kind of starting from the chunk, modeling the chunk, build it up to the word, build it up to the sentence, take it back down to the phoneme level. Okay? So, what else can we be doing? I think one obviously important thing is doing listenings more than once. Sometimes doing listenings where students just listen at first and then later can read and listen. So they get a chance to see how the written language looks, how the spoken language looks when it's written down. If you do this, it also helps you to find out what are they having problems with because they can't hear it, and what are they having problems with because they don't know it. Okay? When students can read what they're listening to, often they'll read it and sort of go, oh, so easy, I understand everything. Well, when you read it, you understand everything because written language is tidy and has spaces between words. The problem is you can't hear it because when you're listening to spoken language, all the words come pouring out at once without a gap. So in that case, the problem is, well, read it and listen and notice how the tidy, clean, separated words on the page sound in the acoustic blur of speech. Sometimes, of course, what happens is students have problems with a listening. They then read the audio script and they still don't understand any of it. Well, the problem there is it's too difficult. There's too much new language in there and they can't hear it because they don't know it. So I think it's thinking about how you can build those different stages in. Use audio scripts to help students find out whether they're struggling because of hearing problems or because of listening problems. A great thing to do, and we'll look at this in a minute, is to gap chunks or phrases, multi-word units in the listening texts. Play it again, get students to try to fill in the missing words, elicit the answers from them, write them up on the board, highlight features of pronunciation, maybe explain some of them, and drill them. Okay, so that way you're kind of focusing on a real skill of listening rather than, you know, the kind of vague, wishy-washy skills of predicting and activating schemata. What you're doing is you're focusing on the skill of decoding the spoken language and being able to transcribe it as written language. You're focusing on being able to hear and decode that stream of speech. I think another great thing to do is to encourage students to read graded readers that come with CDs or with audios that they can stream online. So maybe they read the whole book first, then they read and listen, okay? Or they listen first and then they listen and read. They can do that a range of different ways. And that helps to kind of bridge the separate worlds of the tidy written language and the messy, blurry spoken language. So what we're going to look at just quickly is a few other kind of key things, and then we'll see if there's any questions that come up. So I'm not saying, by the way, that the structure of listening lessons is a bad thing. I'm guessing earlier when you were talking, you probably sort of went, pre-listening activity, post-listening activity. That's fine. As a coursebook writer, as a teacher, that's how I approach listening lessons. But I don't approach it because I'm thinking about skills. I approach it by always thinking about language, okay? And what this means I do is, before I do a listening lesson, especially if I'm writing the lesson myself, but even if I'm teaching a listening lesson from a book somewhere, I will always look at the audio script if I can, maybe listen to the audio, and I will start by analysing the language that's in the text. And I'll be thinking, what language do I think is going to be problematic for my students at this level? Then, when I'm looking at the pre-listening tasks, I'm always looking for an opportunity to teach some language that the students are actually going to hear, okay? So if you're going to do prediction, and we'll look at how this might work in a minute, that's fine, but do it in such a way that it's language focused and that it gives you the chance to help students see and hear some of the things that they're going to meet in the audio. Then, when I'm giving feedback on the gist listening, on the comprehension tasks, again, that's an opportunity for me to focus on language. If I'm doing a second, more detailed listening, maybe true, false questions or listening for specific information, again, it's an opportunity for me to make sure students heard particular bits of language and to focus on those bits of language. I think it's also important to ensure students get repeated opportunities to hear the text. And where there is speaking before and after the listening text itself, you use the speaking that the students engage in as a chance to notice gaps in their lexical knowledge, in their grammatical knowledge, and to focus on and teach connected language which might be useful for them the next time they hear a similar kind of listening. So you're kind of giving feedback to teach forward, feed forward, if you like, okay, rather than feedback. So I'm going to just show you a quick listening text, okay? This is something that we wrote quite a long time ago for a book called Innovations Pre-Intermediate. And it was from sort of somewhere near the end of the book. So not bad pre-intermediate, getting on to intermediate. This was the audio script. And it was a kind of model of conversations that we thought students might want to get better at having themselves, okay? So it's kind of two friends arranging where to meet. And I'm looking through this after I've written it and thinking, okay, there's quite a lot of little bits of language, like, do you want to get something to eat? Have you got anywhere in mind? There's a good Turkish place, not restaurant, just round the corner. I don't really feel like I had a big kebab on my way home last night. I'd rather have something different. Round here, is it very spicy? I can't take it if it's too hot. Loads of dishes to choose from. Bound to find something you'll like. You've talked me into it. Shall we walk or do you want to get a cab? Shall we or do you wanna? Won't take long, will it? Let's just walk. Half an hour at most. So there's lots of little bits that might be new for students and might be worth focusing on. So when I'm then thinking about pre-listening tasks, okay, here's a prediction task, but it's a prediction task that's very, very much focused on the language in the script. So it's basically saying in a few minutes, you might even do a little discussion beforehand. You might say, you know, how often do you eat out? Where's your favorite place to go? What kind of foreign foods do you or don't you eat? What do you like most? What do you like least? You could do that, fine. You then have this, which is, here are 4 questions, put them in order, okay, that you expect to hear them in, and try to think of 2 possible answers. Well, with this task, it's still a prediction task, but it's much, much more language focused. And when I'm just going through it, I can drill the questions. So what do you think the first question is? Yeah, number 2, probably. Are you hungry? You hungry? Are you hungry? What about next? Yeah, probably. Do you want to get something to eat then? Do you want to get something to eat then? Is probably the next one. And then, yeah, have you got anywhere in mind? Have you got anywhere in mind? Are you thinking of somewhere? Yeah, do you have a place to eat in your thoughts, in mind? And possible answers. As students are talking, I might be writing things up on the board. So I might be writing things like, you know, have you got anywhere in mind? Yeah, there's a great Thai place, just the k, okay? And I might say, so I heard one idea. Yeah, have you got anywhere in mind? Yeah, there's a great Thai place very near here. It's just round the corner. Good, okay. Like here, we've got a couple of Turkish places just round the corner. Good, okay. Do you want to walk or shall we get a cab? Yeah, one possible answer, walk. The missing word, yeah, let's walk. Let's walk. Yeah, it sounds like let's walk. Yeah, let's walk, because it'll be quicker. So I might use this as a chance to pre-teach and pre-drill and pre-train the ears for things that students are going to hear. And I'm always looking for that opportunity. So when students then do the listening, they kind of go, oh, that's that thing the teacher just taught us. It's like, no, I know, you see, clever, eh? There's method to what I'm doing. I'm not just, you know, pretty face here. I've got a plan. It's all worked out, this. Then what I would do is think about, as I'm going through the answers, what language am I looking for? So what kind of places do they discuss? Well, first of all, they talk about, let me just check. Yeah, a good Turkish place just round the corner. And the other place, yeah, there's an Indonesian place up north, up in Hendon. Okay, which one do they decide to go to? The Indonesian place. Yeah, why not the Turkish place? Yeah, because he had a big kebab on his way home last night. He feels like something different. And why the Indonesian place? Yeah, lots of different things to choose from. There are loads of dishes to choose from. Good. Okay. I might then say, you're going to hear it again. This time, listen, try to find out if these statements are true or false. Write down the language you hear that tells you the answer. Okay, so the Turkish place is really near, true or false? True. How do you know? It's just round the corner. Speaker B doesn't like Turkish food, true or false? False. He doesn't really feel like, not like, he doesn't really feel like Turkish food tonight because, yeah, he had a big kebab on his way home last night. B loves spicy food, true or false? False. How do you know? I can't take it if it's very hot. I can't eat it. I can't manage it. I can't take it if it's very hot. A bit like me with the heat in my attic up here. The menu's quite limited. False. How do you know? There are loads of dishes to choose from. They decide to take a taxi there. False. How do you know? Let's walk. It'll be quicker. Good. So again, what I'm doing is kind of treating these comprehension checks as a vocabulary exercise, which allows me to hone in on particular bits of sound, drill them, help students hear them better, teach them if needs be. What I might then do, okay, where are we? Sorry. Oh, sorry, yeah. What I might then do is to say, okay, you're going to hear it one final time. This time, listen, fill in the gaps. And the gaps might be the things here in red. So I'd play it again. I'd stop. I'd put students in pairs, compare what you think you heard. Okay, let's just check what you got. So number one, do you want to get, yeah, something to eat? What happens to the pronunciation here? Yeah, tweet, something to eat. Do you want to get something to eat? Something to eat, something to eat. Do you want to get something to eat? And the next one, what's the gap? Have you got anywhere in mind? What happens to the N? Yeah, it becomes a M, doesn't it? Anywhere in mind. Have you got anywhere in mind? The same way, if maybe you're talking about going to see a film. Yeah, I'd love to go to the cinema. Have you got anything in mind? Oh, you're looking for a new teacher. Have you got anyone in mind? And I might just teach those extra questions and drill them. And I'd do the same all the way through, sometimes giving extra examples, okay? So I might say, yeah, number 6, you're bound to find something you like. You're bound to find something you like. I'm sure you will find something you like. Another example, even if England do well in the Euros, they're bound to get knocked out by Germany in the quarterfinals or semi-finals, because that's what always happens. With other ones, I might talk about the grammar, okay? So I might say, number 7, yeah, you've talked me into it. You've talked me into it. What tense is it? Present perfect. Good. Why? From the past to now. Good, you've talked me into it. Anything else someone might talk you into apart from going to a restaurant? Okay, yeah, they might talk you into joining them on an English course. They might talk you into going for a pint after work when you'd really been planning to get back home. But hey, the weather's so lovely and I haven't seen. Okay, you've talked me into it. Okay, so again, I'd be drilling, thinking about the features of the way the sounds sound, thinking about the grammar, thinking about the usage, and doing all of those things together at the same time. So a few final quick points. I think the first thing is, even if students find it difficult, resist the temptation to go straight for the second listening. Okay, I think there's often a temptation to students say, oh, difficult, and the teacher says, oh no, I'll play it again. Better to say, okay, yeah, it's difficult, but in pairs, compare what you did get, see if you got anything. If you're a low-level class, compare your ideas in your first language. That's fine. Then tell me in English what you think you heard. Okay, so always make sure students get the chance to compare in pairs. When you're then rounding up the answers, often you'll just get single words. So what you do as a teacher is to re-lexicalize and re-grammar. So when you're saying things like, number one, true or false? True. How do you know? Corner. Yeah. So the Turkish place was just round the corner. Good. Okay. Yeah. And why he likes Turkish food or not? No, he likes it, but he doesn't really feel like Turkish food tonight. Okay. Maybe students just shout out, no want today. And you go, yeah, good. That's the meaning. Now let's look at the actual language that you heard. What you then do is you think about how to make sure each listen has a different focus and you narrow it down as you go along. Final points is after you've done all of this, okay, after you've pre-taught some language, you've drilled some things, you've used the comprehension questions as a way of honing in on bits of language, you've maybe done a gap fill, you've drilled quite a lot of stuff, you've helped students, you know, decode and focus on the stream of speech. Leave some space for students to respond to the themes and the language within the listening text as human beings. And there are 3 different ways you can do this. And maybe you want to do a mix of these things. So you can have questions directly connected to the text. So you might ask, which of those places would you rather eat in? Why? Are you good with spicy food? What's the hottest thing you like taking? Do you ever grab something to eat on your way home? Have you ever tried Turkish or Indonesian food? When, where, what was it like? You might do something more loosely connected to the theme. What kind of foreign food do you like the most or least? What's the best place near here, near where you live, near where you work to have lunch? What would you recommend foreign visitors have for lunch in your town? Why? When was the last time you got a cab? Where to? Or you might do some questions focused on bits of language that come up from the text. You'll notice here I've highlighted these. I often do this exercise as a revision the next lesson. So I get them to tell me what they can remember about the listening text. We kind of retell it, re-grammaring it, re-lexicalizing it, and then they discuss these questions. Last time you asked someone if they wanted to get something to eat, where'd you go? Was it any good? Anywhere good to go just around the corner from here, from where you work, from where you live? What other places around here do you like? Can you recommend somewhere that has loads of different dishes to choose from? Okay, so it's kind of giving the students a chance to connect what they've been listening to their own worlds and to their own realities. I'm going to stop there. I'm just going to say quickly that I've actually written a whole online course about teaching listening better. If you go to our website, which is www.lexicallab.com, you'll see on the landing page, the front page, the online teacher development section. And in there, there's a course called Teaching Listening Better. It's a kind of 10-hour course which you can take yourself in a self-study mode, doing it in your own time. There's loads of feedback and support, and we're available to ask questions to at any point if you have anything you need to ask about. But if this webinar has kind of whet your appetite for this way of thinking about teaching listening, please do check out the course. It offers a hell of a lot more detail and support than I'm able to do in a 50-minute session. lexicallab.com, teaching listening better. If you're on Facebook, please do find us. We're Lexical Lab Limited on Facebook. Find us, like us, follow us. We're also on Instagram. And if anyone wants to email me for a copy of the slides or with any questions or problems you've got about your own listening classes, it's hugh@lexicallab.com. So I'm going to stop the share there, okay? I think what I'm going to do is just see if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask. If you do, can you just put your questions down in the chat box? And I'll try to deal with whatever comes up. Oh, technically, Eman, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a Hugh. Yeah. How do you assess listening? We're required to give it marks. Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is if you're required to give it marks where you're working, you need to agree internally on what you're marking, okay? So, I mean, I generally don't have to actually assess it. I mean, I guess on a basic level, the way you assess it is by how well students do when answering questions about the listening or in filling in gaps. But I think if you're actually required to give marks as a team of teachers, you need to sit down yourselves and work out what your assessment criteria are. My own feeling, it should be a mixture of, you know, gist questions, specific information questions, and probably some kind of gap filling or, you know, testing of decoding, basically. But I think it's the responsibility of whoever's telling you that you're required to give marks for the listening to show you this is what gets a 4, this is what gets a 7, and this is what gets a 10. I'm glad you all seemed to enjoy that. Thank you for the positive comments. How do you teach listening to older learners? Same way I teach listening to younger learners, basically. Same thing. I mean, you know, I am an older learner, okay? I'm a learner in my 50s myself. I'm not a 19-year-old or a 21-year-old. And when I'm learning to listen, I like to be taught to listen in the same way as I'm talking about listening here, okay? I don't think age affects any of these issues in that sense. How can you encourage your students to improve their listening skills? By doing all the things I've just been talking about in the webinar would be my main feeling. I mean, the bottom line is, I think often what teachers do is they kind of outsource the focus on listening, and they just say, just go home and listen a lot, watch Netflix and YouTube and TED Talks and podcasts. Well, that only works if your students are already good enough to know the vast majority of the language that they hear in those programs. The bottom line, I would say, is to do the things I've been talking about in the class, okay? And what you then do is, you know, main homework, go home, listen to the thing we listened to in class again, this time read the audio script. Okay, listen to it again whilst you're reading the audio script and practice trying to say it at the same speed as you're listening to it at. I would much rather students went home and re-listened to the things they've already listened to than sat there hating themselves because they can't understand things which aren't written for students at that level, but are written for super fluent speakers who spend their lives watching Netflix. Okay. So I think it's being selective about what you recommend them to listen to outside of class. As I said, I also really recommend the graded readers at students' levels, with CDs or live streams that they can access online. You focus on academic English, so students are required to take notes. Yeah, okay. I mean, I have a real problem with this because everyone takes notes in different ways, okay? And how do you decide the criteria for what makes good notes and what makes bad notes? I think the notes are only useful if there's then a task which requires you to put those notes into some kind of practice or some kind of action. So, you know, if you're listening to academic English and you're doing a 10-minute lecture of some kind, fine, get students to take notes, but then they need to use those notes to answer particular questions. And what you assess them on is how well they answered the questions. I don't think you can really assess students on their notes. I know from when I was at university, or from when I'm sitting in conferences, people take notes in very, very different ways. Sometimes I don't take any notes. I just sit there and listen to things, but I'm storing it all up there and processing it and thinking about it. Sometimes I don't take notes, but I tweet while I'm watching a talk. You know, I wouldn't want to be assessed on either of those two things. I would want to be assessed on what I was able to say and respond to and discuss after I've watched something that I've been taking notes or tweeting or just sitting and listening to. So that would be my main thought about that, Susan. Please share some listening test resources. Well, there are millions of test resources out there. And I would say it really depends on the level and the material that you're using, Preeti. I don't think there are just generic listening test resources that are particularly useful unless you're looking for things like, you know, practice tests for Cambridge Advanced or practice tests for PET or whatever. No, I don't think it is, Elena, teaching listening for IELTS. Same principle, same issue, basically. You can't do well in those listenings if you don't have the language. The main thing that helps students move from, say, 6.5 to 7.5 in IELTS is you learn a hell of a lot more language and you understand how that language works and you're able to hear that language when you hear it. So I don't think it is that different. I think, you know, some of the language that you teach might be different, but the principles of doing listening lessons are basically the same. How do you help language learners improve their listening with a variety of English accents? So yeah, it's a really good question, Carla. I mean, as a coursebook writer, we're constantly pushing for a really wide range of accents to be included in listening materials. I think in this day and age, it's unsustainable to only have received pronunciation accents. I think students should be hearing all kinds of different accents, native and non-native, from a very, 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 very low level. So, you know, you train them to get used to hearing different accents by letting them hear different accents. Strategies to address this, it's a matter of exposure, pure and simple. A lot of the time, students don't even notice that they're hearing different accents because they're so focused on the actual message. But I think it's really important not to pretend that there's, you know, one normal way in which English will be delivered to them, because the world doesn't work like that. That way of thinking is gone, I think. You're looking for secondary level students. Yeah, I mean, I don't teach secondary, Preeti, so I would just say Google is your friend in this particular instance and situation. Eman, yeah, I mean, students do need good knowledge of the language in order to be good at listening. And, you know, the primary way you get better at listening is the same as the primary way you get better at speaking or writing or reading, which is to learn more language. And ideally to learn more high frequency language, language that you're going to hear, language that you're going to be exposed to. I mean, you can't get good at listening without learning more language, okay? You can get better at hearing the language you already know through hearing fast speech versions, or, you know, going on things like Youglish, where you hear all kinds of different accents, saying particular expressions. For those of you that don't know it, it's a good thing to check out. Yeah. But yeah, in the end, the bottom line is language development. Okay, I think we've hit a stage where most people who had questions have asked, but do feel free. Do I recommend teaching language learners at a moderate pace or a normal speaking pace? Yeah, okay, I know what you mean. So when I was a younger teacher, I think I made the mistake of always talking to low-level learners like this. Doesn't do them any favors. The important thing is to grade your language and choose the language you're teaching, but to speak relatively normally, okay? I really don't like that whole kind of talking down to students and speaking in that kind of idiot voice. So I would say relatively normal speaking pace, but grade your language dependent on the level, Carla. Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to sign off because I've got to go and get some food for my kids downstairs. Do you use the approach of a list of reduced language? I don't know what you mean by reduced, but obviously I grade my language depending on the levels I'm teaching. Absolutely, definitely, yeah. Going to gonna, yeah, I think even at elementary level, you should hear that going to is often pronounced as gonna, okay? You're not helping students if you pretend that it's always pronounced as going to. You know, that they've got to be able to hear where are you going to stay is where are you going to stay. So that they need to be able to hear that, absolutely, yeah. Even if not necessarily produce that. Although actually it's easier to say a master list of reduced forms. I'm not a fan of the idea of master lists of anything, but I think, you know, it's really useful for students to realize things like I have been is often pronounced as I've been. Okay, so, you know, if that's what you mean, yes, I wouldn't do it as a list. I'd do it bit by bit, day by day, chunk by chunk, as I'm going through as part of my everyday teaching. So I'm going to vanish off. If anyone does have any other questions, please feel free to email me. Always happy to hear from people. It's hugh@lexicallab.com. Please do check out the teacher development courses that we offer at Lexical Lab. We also offer advanced level language classes, predominantly aimed at non-native speaker teachers of English who already speak amazing English and want to get even better. So please do check out what we offer there and find us on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. And thank you very much and keep in touch. Okay, I'm going to close that and I'm going to depart into the sweltering London evening. Take care and keep in touch. Thank you very much.